Hello and welcome back to the demo portion of our lecture series dealing with Chapter 7, which is activity-based costing. So the first exercise that you have to do is exercise 7-1, and that's on page 338. No, sorry, 341. So if you look at the bottom of page 341, they give us a number of activities, and we need to state whether each of these activities are unit level, batch level, product level, or organizational sustaining activity. So um, don't forget the definitions, or remember the definitions really, for each unit level or for each level of activity. We said that when it comes to the unit level activities, these are performed each time a unit is produced. Batch level activities are performed each time a batch is handled or processed, regardless of how many units are going to be in that batch. We said that product level activities relate to specific products, and these usually or typically these product level activities have to be carried out, again, regardless of how many batches are run or how many units of product are produced or sold. Then we said that we had the customer level activities, and if you remember, these relate to specific customers. So the first one, A, says raw materials received from suppliers. So let's think about that one. Is it a unit level, a batch level, product level, or customer level? So if you think about it, you might say, well, this one could be unit level activities, because if you think about it, each unit is going to have raw materials. Could be a batch level activity, right? Because each time we make a batch, we're going and receiving raw materials from suppliers. Or it could also be a product level activity, right? Because certain products require certain raw materials. Now, these activities are definitely debatable, okay? And they're going to depend on specific circumstances that surround a particular company, okay? So let's see what they say about, what is it, Greenrich, I think the name of the company is. What do they say about Greenrich? Do they give us any indication of how the company works? No, they don't. It just says, hey, these are the following activities that occur at Greenwich Corporation, a company that manufactures a variety of products. So for number one, if you put unit, batch, or product level, you wouldn't be wrong, right? Again, because these are debatable and it depends on specific circumstances that surround the company. Now, in my mind, I would think that receiving raw materials from suppliers, that would be a batch level activity, okay? And that's what I'm going with. Batch level activity. And again, the reason why in my mind I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm ordering supplies because I have an order, right? Somebody gave me an order. I'm going to make a batch of something. So I'm going to order my raw materials and I'm going to receive those raw materials, okay? Manage parts inventory. That's number or letter B rather, excuse me. So let's think about that one. Manage parts inventory. So we have overhead of parts, we have overhead that someone manages the parts department. Well, each unit requires parts, right? For each unit of product we make, we're going to have to go to the parts inventory department, and that person's going to have to pull inventory. So in my mind, in my mind, I would argue that managed parts inventory would be product level. Or, yeah, product level. Okay? Because think about it. Each product has certain inventory parts. Okay? You could argue that, hey, managing parts inventory, that could be a unit level activity. You wouldn't be wrong there. C is you do rough milling work on products. Well, think about it. Each unit is going to have to go through the milling department. That would definitely be a unit level activity. Okay, I think that C is pretty pretty set in stone, right? It makes sense that since each part has to go through the milling process, it's going to be a unit level activity. You could go higher and say, oh, it's product level, it's a batch level, but on the smallest, I think at the smallest level, every unit is going to go through that process. So let's look at D. D says interview and process new employees in the personnel department. Well, personnel department, right? We got to interview people. We got to process new employees. Well, that one's really an organizational sustaining, right? Regardless of what we produce, regardless of how many batches we run, regardless of how many units we make, we're still going to have to interview and hire people. So that's going to be an organizational sustaining cost. Okay, so let's look at E. E says design a new product. Well, right off the bat, that's product level, right? Because we're designing products, we're designing new products. There's costs that are associated with the design process. That is definitely going to be a product level activity. So let's look at F. F says perform periodic preventative maintenance on general use equipment. That is going to be an organizational sustaining activity. Organizational sustaining activity. Why? Well, because remember what our organizational sustaining activities are, right? Admin costs that we incur, as well as idle capacity. Well, we're not producing anything, but we have costs, right? Because we got to fix the machines or just do preventative maintenance. We're not going to, allocate that to a product because it's idle cost. So it's automatically right off the bat going to be organizational sustaining. Okay. The next one is the use of general factory building. Well, again, that's going to be organizational sustaining as well. And when we're talking about organizational sustaining activity, these are carried out regardless of which customers served, which products are produced, the number of batches. The use of general factory building, that's going to happen regardless of what we produce. Now the last one is issue purchase orders for a job. Okay, so let's think about that. We get an order that comes in. Hey, I need 100 Shore Life batteries, right? Well, that's going to be a batch level transaction or a batch level activity. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. The next exercise we have to do is exercise 7-2. Now, exercise 7-2 is going to be on page 342. Okay, now this is first stage allocation, right? Notice what they give us. In your book, if you're looking at page 342, underneath the verbiage of the following costs will be assigned using activity-based costing system, they give us the activity cost pools of driver and guard, vehicle operating expenses, vehicle depreciation, customer representative salary expense, office expense, administrative expense. They give us all the costs. These are all the overhead. Costs that total up to $1,630,000. Then underneath that it says, hey, the distribution of resource consumption across the activity cost pool is as follows. So they did the interviews and they talked to, I don't know, maybe the supervisor of the garage and says, hey, how much of your driver and guard wages are consumed by travel? Oh, 50%. How much of your driver and guard wages are consumed by picking up and delivering? About 35%. Okay, great. How much of your driver and guard wages are consumed by customer service? Or, customer service activities? Probably about 10%. Great. They do the same thing with vehicle operating expenses. You have all these overhead expenses for operating your vehicle or operating the vehicles. Out of that cost, how much of it is consumed by the activity of travel? Oh, 70%. What about pickups and delivery? That's about 5%. So all we need to do is multiply the costs that they give us by the distribution of resource consumption by activity cost pool. That's all we need to do. All right, so let's look at the first one. Let's do the driver. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Okay, so here we go. So for travel, we know that the total cost of driver and wages, actually let me do it this way. We know that this cost is $720,000. Okay, 50% of this cost is consumed by travel. So basically, all we have to do is take $720,000 times 50%. That's $360,000. Pickup and delivery, it's 35%, meaning pickup and delivery consumes 35% of driver and guard wages. So we take the $720,000 times that 35%. That gives us $252,000. We do the same thing for customer service. Well, the cost pool or the activity cost pool of customer service consumes 10% of the driver and guard wages. Well, 10% of 720,000 is 72,000. And then we have this other, right? 5%. This non-sustainable activities consumes 5% of driver and guard wages. So 5% times 720,000 is $36,000. Okay. We do the same thing with the vehicle. We have vehicle operating expenses. Out of that overhead cost, or out of all those overhead expenses, travel consumes 70% of vehicle operating expenses. So we know that vehicle operating expenses are $280,000, right? And again, I got that from the top chart. $280,000. So I'm going to take $280,000 times 70%, which ends up being $196,000. I do the same thing with driver and pickup, right? The cost pool of pickup and delivery? Well, it consumes 5% of the vehicle operating expenses. So again, 280,000 times 5% gives me 14,000. Customer service. Well, that consumes 0 of vehicle operating expenses. These organizational sustaining activities, right? This other category. It consumes 25% of vehicle operating expenses. So again, 280,000 times 25% ends up giving me $70,000. Okay, keep doing the same thing. Vehicle depreciation, right? That's a cost, it's an overhead cost. Okay, well, we see that vehicle depreciation is $120,000. That's the total cost that we need to allocate to our activity cost pools. Well, travel consumes 60% of vehicle depreciation. So 60% times $120,000 is $72,000. So we allocate $72,000 of vehicle depreciation to the activity cost pool of travel. Same thing with pickup and delivery. Pickup and delivery consumes 15% of vehicle depreciation costs. Okay, well, 120,000 times 15% gives me $18,000. So again, what we're saying here is by doing pickup and delivery, we're consuming, again, 20% or I'm sorry, 15% or $18,000 of vehicle depreciation. Customer service, 0, right? The activity cost pool of customer service does not consume any vehicle depreciation. Then we have this other category. Well, it's 25%. This other category consumes 25% of vehicle operating expenses. 280,000 times 25% gives me $30,000. So now we have these customer representatives and salaries expense, right? We see here that the activity of travel consumes 0% of customer representative salaries. Pickup and delivery, also 0. But then we get to customer service, okay? So if we look at that top chart, we see that the customer representative salary and expense account is $160,000. So we say, okay, of this $160,000 total cost, how much of that cost is consumed by the activity of customer service? Well, it tells us 90%. Okay, well, 90% of 160,000 ends up being $144,000. Then we have this category of other, right? Other. Well, that's organizational sustaining activity. We really don't care about it, but we're still going to calculate it out. 10% of organizational sustaining activity consumes customer service salary and expenses. So 10% of 160,000 is 16,000. And then we have office expense. So we say the same thing. Okay, we have this activity cost pool of, we have this office expense. The activity cost pool of travel. How much or what percentage of travel does, or what percentage of travel consumes office expenses? Well, 0. Okay. Pickup and delivery. Well, pickup and delivery consumes 20% of office expenses. Okay. All right. So what is our office expense? Well, if we look at that top chart, we see that the office expense is $30,000. So we have office expense of $30,000. We need to allocate it to these cost pools. Well, pickup and delivery consumes 20% of office expense. So 20% times 30,000 is $6,000. Customer service. Customer service actually consumes 30% of customer representative salaries and expenses. Or excuse me, I misread it. Sorry. Office expenses. Customer service consumes 30% of office expenses. So $30,000 times 30%, that's 9,000. And then we have this organizational sustaining activity. Well, this organizational sustaining activity consumes 50% of office expenses, which ends up being $15,000 because I take 50% times 30,000. Then we have administrative costs, right? We have an administrative expense. It's $320,000. Okay. So we go to the head of the administrative department, and we say, okay, we've developed these cost pools. We've identified these cost pools. We want to know of your cost how much of each of these activities are consuming your cost. Well, the administrative assistant or the head of administrative says, well, my people really do nothing with travel, right? So 0%. They allocate none of their time to travel. Okay. Well, what about pickup and delivery? Well, actually, pickup and delivery is 5%. So what we're saying is, when we talk to the head of administrative, hey, out of all your people, how much time would you say that they allocate or work on pickup and delivery tasks? About 5%. So that means 5% of that administrative expense is consumed by the activity of pickup and delivery. We take 5% times $320,000, and that gives us 16,000 bucks. Then we say, okay, administrative expenses. You have 320,000. How much of your people's time or your department's time is spent working on customer service, right? There's all these activities that deal with customer service. How much of your time spent doing customer service tasks? Oh geez, probably about 60%. That's pretty much the majority of the stuff that we do is deal with customers. Great. So we say that customer service consumes 60% of administrative expense. 60% times the 320 gives me $192,000. And then they say, you know what? We say, since we're interviewing, hey, you know what? That doesn't equal 100%. So you got 35% left. What do you guys do? Well, you know what? It goes more towards, other organizational sustaining activities. Okay, so these other activities or organizational sustaining activities consume 35% of administrative expenses. 35% times 320 gives me $112,000. So now we calculate up our total. These are the total activity costs, right, for travel. And I'm just adding up 360,000, 196,000, 72,000. I get an total activity cost, pool cost, if you will, of $628,000. Pickup and delivery, that total cost is $306,000. Customer service is $417,000, and other is $279,000. If we add all these costs up, we're going to end up with $1,633,000. Guess what? That's the total overhead cost. Okay? So let's look at exercise 10. Question 10, exercise 7-3. It's on the same page 342. Now here, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and we need to calculate the activity rates. Okay, so this is the third step. Calculate the activity rates. Very easy to do, right? If you look at the problem, it's Green Thumb. It's a small gardening service. They use ABC system, activity-based costing system, to estimate costs for pricing and other purposes. The proprietor of the company believes that costs are driven primarily by the size of customer lawns, the size of customer garden beds, the distance to travel to customers, and the number of customers. So right then and there, because the proprietor believes that costs are driven by four things: size of the customer's lawn, size of the customer's garden bed, distance to travel, and the number of customers, we have four activities. Okay, in addition to the cost of maintaining gardening beds, in addition, the costs of maintaining garden beds depends on whether the beds are low maintenance beds, mainly ordinary trees and shrubs, or high maintenance beds, mainly flowers and exotic plants. Accordingly, the company uses the 5 activity cost pools listed below. So guess what? They already listed the activity cost pools. They already gave us the activity measure. Caring for lawn. Well, the activity measure is going to be square foot of the lawn. That makes sense. Caring for gardening beds, low maintenance, square feet of low maintenance beds. Caring for gardening beds, high maintenance, square feet of high maintenance beds. The activity cost pool of travel to jobs. Well, the activity measure is going to be miles. Customer billing and service. The activity measure there is number of customers, okay? So then what they do is they then give us the estimated overhead costs for lawn care, caring for high maintenance and low maintenance beds, the cost to travel to jobs, and the customer billing and services. They also give us the expected activity. All we got to do is calculate the activity rate. So let's look at caring for lawns. And I'm looking at the bottom box all the way at the end of the page, okay? Excuse me. They tell us that the estimated overhead cost is $72,000, okay, for that activity. The expected activity level is 150,000 square foot. We divide to figure out what our activity rate is. We end up with 0.48 or 48 cents per square foot of lawn. Okay, let's look at the caring for garden beds that are low maintenance. The cost is $26,400. Right? This is the estimated overhead cost that we're going to incur if we care for beds, low maintenance beds. We estimate that we're going to care for about 20,000 square feet of low maintenance lawn beds. So if we divide, we end up with $1.32 per square foot of low maintenance beds. We do the same thing for caring for garden beds, high maintenance. What's the total cost? Well, $41,400. What's the expected activity? Well, the expected activity is 15,000 square feet. Okay, we divide expected activity by the cost. We end up with $2.76 per square foot. Travel to jobs. Well, that's going to, estimated cost is going to be $3,250. The expected activity is going to be 12,500 miles. Again, we divide. We end up with 0.26 or 26 cents per mile. And then we have customer billing and service. Well, that cost or estimated cost is 8,750. We divide that by the expected activity level. Well, we expect 25 customers. So then that means that we have $350 per customer. And that is how you calculate activity rates. Number 11 is problem 7-4. And 7-4 is on page 343. So what we have here is Klumper Corporation. It's a diversified manufacturer of industrial goods. The company's activity-based costing system contains the following 6 activity cost pools and activity rates. So they already did step 1, step 2, and step 3 for us, right? They said, here's your activity cost pools, supporting direct labor, machine processing, machine setup, production orders, shipments, product sustaining. Okay, that's not organizational sustaining, that's product sustaining. Okay, they figured out all the costs, which they didn't give us that information, figured out the allocation base of how much of each of these activity cost pools consumes that overhead resource, estimated the total cost, estimated the activity, and gave us the activity rates. All we need to do is apply. It's all we need to do. Okay? So we have 2 jobs here. So we have K425 and M67. Okay? So what we need to do is allocate. Well, they give us the supporting direct labor. Oh, sorry. Okay. So let's look at supporting direct labor. That is the first activity cost pool, and we know that the activity rate is $6, right? $6 per direct labor hour. Well, we know that K425 uses 80 direct labor hours. So I multiply, or I plug in the 80 hours of activity. I then get the total cost, let me rephrase that, total supporting direct labor cost for job K425. Okay? Again, 6 times 80 gives me $480. I do the same thing with machine processing. I can tell from the top chart that machine processing is $4 per machine hour. That's my activity rate. Well, what's my activity? Well, my activity for K425 consumes 100 machine hours. Okay, so I take $4 times $100, or 100 hours, excuse me. That gives me $400. I do the same thing for machine setup, right? I know that the machine setup is $50 per setup, right? That's the activity rate. Well, how many setups does K425 go through? Well, it goes through 1. Oh, sorry. $50 times 1, well, it's $50. It's pretty easy. What about production orders? Well, production orders has an activity rate of $90 per order. Okay, so how many production orders does K425 have? Well, it has 1. So that's $90. Shipments. The activity rate for shipping is $14 per shipment. We only ship 1 of product K425. So I'm going to multiply that by 1. That gives me obviously $14. And then I do the same thing with, I do the same thing with product sustaining. I know that the product sustaining cost pool has an activity rate of $840, right, per product. How many products am I making? Well, one, K425. The chart tells me it's only one product sustaining, or one product. So I multiply that by 1. That ends up giving me $840. I then calculate my total overhead cost under the activity-based costing. 480 plus 400 plus 50 plus 90 plus 14 plus 840 gives me 1,874. I do the same exact thing with product M67. Okay, so direct or supporting direct labor, again, the activity rate is still $6. That hasn't changed, but the activity of direct labor, or let me rephrase that, M67 consumes 500 hours of direct labor. So that's an activity of 500. So 6 times 500 gives me $3,000. I do the same thing with machine processing. I know that the activity rate for the activity cost pool of machine processing is $4 per machine hour. So I need to look at job M67 and say, okay, well, how many machine hours does job M67 use? Well, it uses 1,500. Okay, $4 times 1,500 gives me $6,000. I know that the activity cost pool of machine setup has an activity rate of $50 per machine setup. Okay, so how many setups does product M67 go through? Well, it goes through 4. So my activity level there is 4. 50 times 4 should give me 200. 200, there we go. And then we go to production orders, right? I know that the activity cost pool of production order has an activity rate of $90 per order. Okay, how many orders do I have of M67? Well, I have 4. So I'm going to take my activity rate of 90 times my 4 orders that I actually have. 90 times 4 is $360. Shipments. Well, I know the activity cost pool of shipments has an activity rate of $14 per shipment. Okay, how many shipments do I send out of M67? Well, it says 10. Okay, so I'm going to take my activity rate of $14 times the number of shipments, 10. I end up with $140. Product sustaining. I know that the product sustaining activity cost pool has an activity rate of $840. Okay, well, M67, how many products do I have? Well, I have 1. So the activity is 1. So I get $840. My total overhead cost under activity-based costing for product M67 is $10,540. And that is how you allocate activity rates using activity-based costing. So those are the three the bulk of the problems that you're going to see in the pre-built problem, which is set up, by the way. So if you have any questions, if any of this is still a little confusing, please text me. I would love to have a phone call or a big blue button session with you. I have no problem with that. If you're having any difficulty grasping this stuff, because it is a little convoluted, right? I get that. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free and text me. I'd be more than happy to help you out. All right. Good luck this week, and I'll talk to you soon.